the King 3 report was issued in September 2009. And I've always had the JSE represented on my committee. And they require the principles enunciated in King 3 as a listing requirement. So companies listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange need to follow the King 3 principles and practices recommended on an apply or explain basis. In other words, it's flexible. If in one's business one decides that the practice recommended is not appropriate for your business, you're perfectly entitled to adopt another practice, but then you must explain why you've departed from what is internationally regarded as best practice. And as I say in the introduction to King 3, the ultimate compliance officer as to whether you are practicing good governance or not is not a compliance officer, it's your stakeholders. They will very quickly tell you whether you have been practicing something which they find justifiable for that particular business, that company, in that situation. But you're interested in the social aspects. So companies do not operate in a vacuum. They operate in the milieu in which they find themselves, the same as you and I find ourselves in a changed world. And the changed world at the moment involves specifically the following aspects: financial crises, climate change, ecological overshoot, which is the technical term for the fact that you and I personally, and as directors of companies, or as agents for third parties, have used the natural assets of planet Earth faster than nature's regenerating them. Clearly not a sustainable issue. Evolutionary, revolutionary, and radical transparency required now of people and companies, evidenced by the Arab Spring, where the dictators in the north of our continent tried to stop the news coming out of there, but we all knew it was happening through social media, for example. Greater expectations of stakeholders linked to companies. Stakeholders today want to know not only the single bottom line in rands and cents, they want to know the company has not conducted its business adversely impacting and at the cost of the environment, society, and in breach of human rights, for example, using child labor. And that includes not only the company, but its supply chain, those who supply it with input products to make its product or its service. And then we have population growth. We have 7 billion people on the planet at the moment, and in 35, 40 years' time, we're going to have 9 billion. And I always speak in hotel terms that we have no vacancies. The hotel is full. And yet we're going to have another 2 billion people on the earth, and we already have food, lack of food security. And of course, water is the most critical commodity on planet Earth. So people used to talk about the triple bottom line. We don't talk about that anymore. If you read King 3, we point out that a company operates in a triple context: financial, commercial, environmental, and society. And perhaps one of the best examples is something that only happened in the last 9 months. Who would have thought Nestle, the world's greatest food producer, would have been attacked by Greenpeace? When one says Greenpeace, you conjure up in your mind the image of a boat trying to stop Japanese whalers catching whales in the sea. But yeah, Greenpeace started attacking Nestle in the marketplace in Europe and America for palm oil. If you've been to Kuala Lumpur, you will know that driving from the airport into Kuala Lumpur for about 40 odd kilometers, you just see palm oil trees. That was forestation which was cut down to grow palm oil to supply large companies like Nestle with palm oil to make the products that you and I use and eat. And meanwhile, Kuala Lumpur is choking because of this lack of forestation around it, which of course absorbs CO2 and creates oxygen. And so they started this market boycott of Nestlé's product, and Nestlé reacted and is changing the way it now obtains its palm oil. And some of the palm oil is being cut down and the place is being reforested. So in the real world in which we live, we can no longer ignore society. The company has to look at the environmental and societal issues, the impact that the activities of the companies have on these two elements because of the triple context. And you have to take into account in your long-term strategic thinking, you've got to embed into that long-term strategic thinking society and the environment. Now, in most countries around the world today, we have responsible investment by financial institutions. In South Africa, we have the Code for Responsible Investment, which is effective from the 1st of February 2012, which means that your pension fund, for example, the trustees of your pension fund have to take account of the impact which a company has on society and environment, ESG factors, environmental, social and governance. What are they practicing quality governance? Because quantity is not the answer, a tick box approach, it's a state of mind. Quality governance, and are they adversely impacting on environment or society? Because if they are, then perhaps one of the greatest intangible assets of the company, its reputation, can be destroyed, and its market capitalization can be dramatically reduced. So the trustees of your pension fund have to carry out what we've called responsible investing. They, in their investment analysis before investing your money in the equity of a company, have to look at the ESG factors in the company and ask the following kind of questions, which are enumerated in the Responsible Investment Code. Has the company done an integrated report, which means has the company shown how it has embedded sustainability into its long-term strategic thinking so that an informed assessment can be made by the trustees of your pension fund that this is a company that's going to sustain value creation in 30 years' time when you retire. Because just looking at the annual financial statement, you cannot make that conclusion, you cannot draw that conclusion. So has the company done a sustainability report? If not, why not? What is the traceability on the supply chain to the company? Is one of its suppliers using child labor, for example? Because that could hugely impact on the value of the company. So all this is happening. So you have these market forces of responsible investment from the providers of capital to a company, which a company needs to grow, and traceability of input products. So these two market forces are even compelling SME suppliers to start practicing what I call good governance. And by that I mean intellectual honesty, and honestly acting in the best interest of this incapacitated entity called the company, because it's a person, but it's incapacitated and inanimate until you and I as individuals animate it by becoming its directors. So the company has become very integral to society today. I believe more integral than the family unit. Extraordinary statement. But let's just examine it. When Lehman Brothers collapsed, it impacted on the lives of billions of people. That's adverse. Positively, Microsoft is positively impacting on the lives of billions of people. So one can no longer divorce corporate life from society, from societal life, and vice versa. So the integrated report is an acceptance by the international financial accounting bodies, the International Accounting Standards Board, which sets standards for how our companies report financially, Financial Accounting Standards Board of America for their standards, the International Audit and Assurance Standards Board, the chairman of the Big Four auditing firms, the World Wild Fund, the Chartered Institute of Management Accountants. The chairman of all these bodies sit on my board, the International Integrated Reporting Council, of which I'm proud to be the chairman. And there's acceptance from them, this is over a year ago, that corporate reporting as we've known it for decades is no longer fit for purpose. Simply because from the financial statement you cannot make an informed assessment about how a company a good corporate citizen. Is it impacting positively on society or negatively? Is it using natural assets in a positive manner, or is it just consuming to your detriment and my detriment? So corporate reporting has to change, and the integrated report simply means that the application of the collective mind of the board of a company to highlight the critical financial issues, the critical sustainability issues as water is to the beverage manufacturer, to show in the long-term strategic plan of that beverage manufacturer they've got a plan to reduce, reuse, replenish and recycle water, so that the trustees of your pension fund can draw an informed conclusion that this is a business that's going to sustain value creation in the long term in the changed world in which we find ourselves. And consequently, then they can discharge their duty to you to invest in this company. So integrated reporting is the model of new corporate reporting. And it's critical because reporting influences behavior. The Japanese have a wonderful saying, if you open your kimono, you better make sure you've had a good bath. And that's exactly right. If you report, for example, that you are dyeing fabrics, but you're not treating the chemicals after you've dyed and you're just discharging it straight into a river, which is illegal, but assuming that's what you report, well, you are not going to survive as that company, because eventually the consumer is not going to buy your product. The shop that is selling it will be boycotted. Something's going to happen. So the world has changed completely. We cannot, with the mindsets that created all these problems, carry on business. The mindsets have got to change. And the tools that we've used for years in reporting and carrying on business have to change. You can't change by using the same mindsets and the same tools. And one of the tools is the way we've reported, and it has to change. It's an acceptance that the company is not only important to shareholders, the providers of capital. The company is critical to society at large, and the company has several stakeholders depending on its business, different kinds of stakeholders. And the modern approach is the inclusive approach to governance, that management has to take account of the needs, interests and expectations of stakeholders, and the board needs to take this into account in its decision making, but guided always by a decision in the best interest of the company for the maximization of its total economic value. Notice, not book value, total economic value, which includes its intangible assets, such as being a good corporate citizen, not impacting adversely on society and environment, etc. So all these things today have to be taken into account. And that's why in King 3 we have an absolute separate chapter on stakeholder relationships. And I've advised companies to have it on their agenda for every board meeting, stakeholder relationships. Because some of the major companies today are appointing corporate stakeholder relationship officers. And their sole job is to talk to these external stakeholders, find out what their perception is of the company. What do they think of the management of the company? What do they think the company is acting as a good corporate citizen? The quality of its product and services. What are their expectations of the company? This is fed into management. Management can manage then on a more informed basis. Management can then develop strategy on a more informed basis to the board. The board then being informed, at least quarterly, as to what's happening with stakeholders on a strategic ongoing communication basis through management, will be able to be more informed in developing strategy with sustainability embedded into it. So strategic ongoing communication with stakeholders has become critical in leadership.